Hello, everyone, and good evening. I am your host, Jason Miles, and welcome to another episode of This is Revolution Podcast. If you're new to the channel, please hit like, hit subscribe, and don't forget to hit that notification bell as we are adding new shows and cross streams constantly. Also, if you get a chance, check out last month's video essay, Welcome to the Terror Dome, and the following video essay recap Pascal and I did. And moving forward for our champagne room, we will be doing a call-in show Tuesdays and Thursdays. So before only Thursday was the call-in show. Sometimes now we are very diligent. Tuesday and Thursday, and sometimes we may do one on Saturday. We'll see how we feel this Saturday. I haven't talked to Pascal too much about the topic, so I don't know if we want to roll that out on a Saturday. But generally, when we do, we roll it out for patrons only. We can only give the number to patrons. And if you want to become a patron, it's as simple as going to patreon.com/Bitter Lake Presents. And for as low as $30, you can have access for the year to all the champagne room conversations and shenanigans. On that note, let me bring in my partner in crime and slime. He is the man of the Mau Mau Hour. He is the Pascal Robert.
Peace and greetings to the chat. Peace and greetings to the audience. Peace and greetings, Jason Miles.
How are you?
Doing all right. I talked to Janice Graham a couple of days ago.
I saw you didn't even say anything. You went on her show.
No, I didn't go on her show. I just talked to her on the phone.
Okay, my bad.
She said some interesting things. We had an interesting conversation. We'll have to talk off air about that.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Nothing bad, just interesting things.
Sounds very spicy. But I'm here. Yes. I'm here for it. And back by popular demand, he was out on a Death Star middle manager's retreat. Basically, how to deal with insubordinate inquisitors. He is the one, the only, Deep State Kuba.
Hello, everyone. It's nice to be back. There was some messy internal investigations before we discovered that where the Jedi infiltrator was. I'm not going to say whether I was the one doing the torturing or being tortured, but the important thing is that my record is clear.
What's funny is like whenever there's like we had Jackie Lukman on Saturday, and poor Jackie was having all kinds of Wi-Fi issues because she wasn't at home, she was in a hotel, and people were saying, "Oh, Kuba's at it again." Like, that's like the whole running thing. No, whenever someone has Wi-Fi issues, it's like back there pulling the strings.
Yeah, maybe it's to save your ass, right? It's like, oh, I do not want my bosses to hear where this is going to go. So let's just shape the conversation in a more constructive direction.
Also, for those few Star Wars fans that do watch this channel, I have been watching Kenobi. Jean Bajlan and I have very different feelings on the young black actress that has caught all kinds of hell. Have you seen that?
I'm so glad you brought that up.
Have you seen that, Pascal?
I have not. I actually, let me tell you something. Let me tell you how much I have actually gone to almost indulge your appreciation of Star Wars pop culture. I inquired of my brother. For those who know, my brother lives we share a house together. And I asked him, do we have Disney Plus? He said, well, you have DirecTV. I've got a Fire Stick, so I have Disney Plus. I don't think you have Disney Plus. So I was like, okay. He was like, well, why do you ask? I said, well, apparently, I think that they have this Obi-Wan Kenobi thing that's on, Disney Plus that I want to check out because, Jason is always talking about this stuff. check it out. He was like, check it out. It's not bad. It's okay. But, I'll see if we'll see if we can get it on your TV or whatever. And then I'm reading all of these posts about this black woman who was, I don't know, she's a Dark Force Jedi or
she's a Sith. She's
a Sith.
Yeah.
There's all this commentary. Star Wars is being attacked. People are like, oh my God, this is blasphemous. She doesn't belong here. And then, of course, Star Wars is like, oh, no, this is the right thing to do. We support her all the way. So I was wondering, I wonder if I should inquire of Jason, is this an attempt at wokeness in the Star Wars universe? Or because we do have Colt 45 loving from back in the day.
This is what I said. I want this on the record. Lando Calrissian is a space pimp. Billy D. Williams playing Lando Calrissian is a space pimp.
He has a cape.
Idris Elba wears that same outfit, plays that same role. Then Lando Calrissian is a manager of a gambling colony, a mining colony.
Idris Elba's in this movie too?
No, I'm just saying if he was to play Lando's role.
Oh, okay.
If Lou Gossett Jr. was to play that role, you can input any amazing black actor in that role, and it will be extremely different. When Billy D's pimpy Colt 45 drinking ass puts on that shit with his good hair having ass.
Oh, he has that voice too, right?
Oh my God. There's I'm line for line. If LeVar Burton was in that role, there's no way in the world you would feel like he's a space pimp. Billy D. Williams might be one of the coolest cats in the history of cool cats.
Let me tell you something. Let me tell you the last full Star Wars movie I watched that I actually liked. This may shock you. Was Han Solo.
That was good. I like Solo.
What did you think about my man playing the early
Donald Glover, right?
Donald Glover, yeah.
It took me a while. I didn't want to like it at first because it's not Billy D, but I watched it twice, and the second time I watched it, I enjoyed the whole thing. I just sat back and watched it with Phoenix.
Donald Glover is, I've been a fan since he was on Community, and then the Childish Gambino, and then Atlanta, and he does not have that same smoothness ever as Billy D. Yeah, he's a nerd, and he's got some kind of it feels like he might go off at any moment. There's some like pent up, repressed, wound up tension. Whereas Billy D. Williams, it's like no matter what, he's gonna be the coolest cat in the room. Mm-hmm. He walks in, the temperature drops 3 degrees because he's that cool.
Yes. That being said, the new Star Wars movies, starting with Force Awakens, kind of got a lot of people upset when the young man takes off his stormtrooper helmet and you see a black person under it. First of all, because he's not a clone, right? And I'm not going to
black stormtroopers canonically have always been beige.
Yeah, they've all been Maori, right?
Exactly, space Maori.
But I'm not gonna get into all that. But I'll say this. I also want this on the record. I've worked with people in the Klan. I've experienced real deal racism to the point where I've been told to leave the state of Mississippi. That being said, I've never seen anything to the level of Star Wars fans when a black person comes in and has any sort of position of power. When George Lucas married a black woman, they announced it on the Star Wars Facebook page, and all it was dirty, greedy, nigger bitch comments. They said nigger more than I've ever heard on a rap record.
And they, not the gentlemanly Terminal A either, right? But
So
it was the only thing comparable was the response when Idris Elba was cast in Thor.
Oh, that was crazy.
Yeah, it was. And I'm white guy who's very interested in early European history, which I know is sus as hell. And I know why, because it attracts a certain unsavory element, and you have these crypto racists that want to treat things like Norse mythology or medieval history or the classics or Star Wars even, right? Like as their white supremacist playground, their kind of fantasy land of uncomplicated, Caucasian myth making. And it is a little discordant sometimes when, whatever. Thor is Marvel. He's a superhero. He's got he's friends with the Hulk. That you can do whatever you want in there. But for instance, there was a series of videos about Roman Britain, in which they were depicting the life of Britons in that period, and they had historians signing off on it, where the main focus was on a black centurion. And that's not outrageous. There were black centurions in the Roman Empire, certainly. Not very many. And of that number, of that not very large number, very, very few would have been sent to Britain. Because why? Why the hell would you do that? You would only get that if you were being punished for something. It's like the worst job you can have, and you're badly suited for it. Because when the locals see a black guy in a Roman military uniform, in Roman armor, they're going to assume he's a demon. Like they've never seen one before, and so clearly the Romans are sending demons after us now. And it would be a very unusual thing for that to happen. And if you want to show people what Roman Britain was like, it would just be a bunch of Italian guys, right? Yeah. Like they would be the centurions. And so it doesn't bother me. Like, I'm not going to tweet about it or anything. It's just, you can see that there's a conscious step being made in the presentation of not just fantasy, which 100%, you can cast whoever you want as a god of Asgard or as a Jedi or as a stormtrooper. Mm-hmm. But even when you're looking at actual history, this kind of retconning of a very contemporary notion of diversity, where like not every culture is always diverse.
I mean, the thing is ironic for me is that in the converse, I think about how many times I've had to watch stories of films or television programs about biblical history figures, and they're all blonde hair, blue eyes,
yeah, absolutely,
as if they can protect behavior. And I'm not trying to say that all the biblical figures were Zulu Mandingo looking Negroes from the Watusi tribe of Africa. What I'm saying, they weren't exactly looking like blonde hair, blue eyes either.
Absolutely,
it's like Mediterranean people have melanin.
Exactly. Exactly.
Ranges of color.
100%. It is weird when you see biblical figures that are speaking English too. And the weirdest thing is they're speaking English with a British accent for some reason, because Brits like that since it's flattering, and Americans just assume that every foreigner of dignity just speaks English with a British accent.
No, it's a really just the whole way in which we project American and Western racial angst into every aspect of artistic creativity, of literature, of popular culture is just so freaking just boring. It's beyond annoying now. It's just boring to me. It's so corny. Like, how are you so vested in something so trivial? Isn't there enough annoying crap that you have to be worried about in your life, as opposed to whether or not there's a black woman who has a figure or a plays a character in a Star Wars movie? Is that what you're upset?
It's bad, man. So I follow Star Wars on Instagram because I'm as a 44-year-old man, I'm loving all this, fun, silly content, right? Stranger Things season 4. I'm sitting around here giggling my ass off. And I see
Um,
what's the name?
yeah, it's as though everyone in the cultural management, the management of culture, has decided that the only thing that there's any hope of changing, the only place that there's any kind of traction, is identity issues. Or are we going to talk about economic oppression? No. Are we going to talk about maldistribution of power? No. Are we going to talk about meaningful democracy? No. What we're just going to do is counterpose appropriately diverse hierarchies against the bad, evil hierarchies that are ethnic monoliths.
And the project is so transparently neoliberal in that it's done as under the guise of avoiding actually dealing with the conundrum of the economic perplexities that we're in right now.
Oh, it's what made it sad is someone had wrote, it seems to me like they're trying to get more views. And that would be my first thought as well, because that's kind of what usually people do. You make up some sort of drama. And apparently Kenobi is the most watched series on Disney Plus right now. And I don't think it's that. I sat around and I did the unthinkable and I read the comments, and just about everyone was like, I hate that black chick. And part of it is because of her character. Her character is a very detestable character. And watching the show, my first instinct was, fuck, I hate this woman. And it took me to the third episode. I was like, she's doing such a great job that I hate her. Like, I'm actually hating her. That means you are doing
great actress,
great actress.
Playing a terrible, terrible human being, or Sith being, person of Sith.
Like it's, if they would have put makeup on her, which I feel like they didn't, because she's actually a very pretty woman, in my opinion. So I think they were like, well, you're too pretty for us to put you behind face paint. Like all the other Inquisitors have light faces on the cartoon. And so she's the only one that doesn't. And at first I was like, well, why would they do that? And I can see what people will think is some sort of like, oh, they're just trying to get representation. It's like, no, she's just so pretty. It's like Ryan Reynolds in Deadpool. That was one of the things why they didn't want to have him do that role. They were like, your face sells tickets. And if we can't have your face in this movie in some capacity, we're going to lose out on ticket sales. So this woman is just like, oh, she's attractive. We don't need to put any makeup on her. We don't even do anything with her fucking hair. You know, she can have the braids. And
is she good in the role?
Yes, she plays a deplorable human very, very well.
Are Sith, by definition, human, though?
Yes.
And no, they can be aliens like Darth Maul, right?
Well, yeah. She's was it? Oh, you guys are gonna get this. People are gonna be talking so much shit about this. So she was when Anakin Skywalker came in and killed all the younglings. She was one of those younglings that he didn't kill.
Well, clearly his mistake was not getting all of them.
Well, the thing is, they turned who was down to be turned into what are now the Inquisitors. So she had they give her a bit of a little sad backstory. I think she's going to be a turncoat. One of the things that George Lucas was trying to do before he left was use the cartoons to really tell the story of the inequalities that it had existed throughout the galaxy, even before the Empire, the issues with Jedi, as far as the way they even viewed war and conflict. Because Rosario Dawson's character is someone that leaves the Jedi Order because she doesn't believe in imperialism. Yeah.
It's a very...
And you're gonna tell me this is not woke?
Is that woke though?
Well, I mean, the thing is called the Empire, right? I mean, like, we don't believe in imperialism.
She's not a Sith. Rosario Dawson's character was Anakin's Padawan before he turns to the dark side, and she left the Jedi Order. So it's you gotta. There's like,
she didn't want to fight for the Empire.
No, she said, "I'm not fighting for anybody, and I'm going to try to form like a."
She didn't even want to fight for the Republic, and the Jedi Order, because they were, a bunch of mystical space wizards running around getting into people's shit and starting wars and stuff.
Yeah, Rosario. You gotta watch it. They were also trying to show that you can't overthrow powers this big without class traitors. So there's a lot. They're not a lot, but there's definitely class traitors throughout these movies that do things that help the rebellion. Like, your rebellion is pretty futile when that powerful unit is like, no one is moving. We fuck you. And so it's to me, it's an interesting story. I'm liking the fact that they took a showrunner from the Lucas days to do these new shows. I think they're giving them pretty much carte blanche, because they're like, we just cash checks on all these toys anyway. We give a damn what you say. We can do all of our woke shit with the Marvel stuff.
And also the if you've got a creative team that you're trying to manage, you're gonna get some commies in there. It's inevitable, right? Like, you're dealing with writers, you're gonna get some communism. It's just comes with the territory. So dump them in a can't fail franchise where they have to dress it up with lightsabers, and you've essentially neutered them. Or at least you don't have to think about them, because the backlash you get won't take the form of being accused of being anti-American or something.
Someone said the Jedi Order is the equivalent of the CIA. Wow.
I don't know if I
Yes, just as heroic. They're out there protecting us.
She leaves for a reason. Luke has his issues when if you watch the cartoons, they really got deep into it. George Lucas was trying to tell a story that I think at the time he was doing the prequels, there was no one around to guide him to make it a little less over the top with all the verbiage. Because remember, that was the knock on the first movie, was that the dialogue sucked. So how are you going to tell this man that created this massive multi-billion-dollar franchise that you're doing something way worse than you ever thought you were doing with the first one? With, 2.5 hours of dialogue about taxes, trade agreements, and embargoes.
Well, not only that, but very poor management of trade agreements.
I will say that as someone who is old enough to actually have seen the original Star Wars at the time that they came out in the theater, those are my favorite ones. The first, I guess they're called the prequels, episode I think it's 4, 5, and 6. Is that?
Oh no,
what
those are the first ones.
That's the original.
Original, yeah.
The prequels are the shit that came out in the 90s.
Yeah, 1, 2, and
Okay,
3.
well, I like episode 4, 5, and 6. The original. I like those. That storyline is interesting. The one that came out in the 90s, I like the last one where they really finally divulged the story of Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker. I thought that was pretty cool. The first two I thought kind of sucked, but the last one was pretty awesome.
I mean, the prequels did introduce the deepest and most authentic character for me in the Star Wars franchise, somebody that I could really relate to, because his struggle mirrored my own. And I'm talking, of course, of Jar Jar Binks.
I knew you were going to say it.
Are you the Jar Jar Binks of TIR?
Well, have you heard Sith Jar Jar theory?
Yes, I have.
And I think they might be onto something with it. And it's a case of a brilliant idea. Actually, to tie it back to what we were talking about earlier, you have in Obi-Wan, you've got this great actress that's playing a horrible character. And as a result, her screen presence makes you detest her. So I think the way that Sith Jar Jar theory goes is that in the original, Yoda was this kind of cartoonish, bumbling character that secretly turns out to be a Jedi mastermind.
Mm-hmm.
And George Lucas, in his kind of myth-making theory, really likes the random character that seems to be just in the right place at the right time, gets picked up, a kind of hero of chance that turns out to have this kind of mastermind behind the scenes role. That is the player, the chess master that's moving the pieces into position to make the big things happen. And when you look at what Jar Jar Binks does, well, he's the one who actually gives emergency power to Emperor Palpatine. He's the one that basically ushers in the Empire. And the conventionally, like a shallow reading is like, oh, he's just a buffoon, a useful idiot. But the Sith Jar Jar theory says that no, this was his plan all along. He was in on it, and that was supposed to be the reveal in the third prequel. But he was so annoying. He was just so full spectrum awful, so cringeworthy that the showrunners got cold feet. They're like, we can't pull this off. Too much.
Force the vote. If I start that as a hashtag on Twitter, would everyone watching please retweet it? Jar Jar force the vote.
That would be politically problematic.
Now, we are so politically problematic at this point.
Use it to just attach it to a Sith Jar Jar theory breakdown on YouTube, because it's honestly like maybe that was Jimmy Dore's plan all along, right? He's just a failed Jar Jar.
Well, since we've been talking about Jar Jar and racist fans, let's talk about something more interesting, because this is the news roundup. I guess we are rounding up the important topics of the day, right? Let's talk about Johnny Depp and Amber Heard while we're at it.
What?
I'm just kidding. But on the cover of the LA Times this morning, the main headline above the fold was the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard case. Then next was the next big headline was a story about grieving families in Uvalde, Texas. And then below the fold, on the very bottom, in small print, I was looking for it actually, was a mention of the shooting in a hospital in Tulsa. My first reaction was a bit of shock because I understand in the news business, if it bleeds, it leads. But I guess celebrity gossip trumps even continued national tragedy of rampage gun violence in public spaces. A hospital shooting, not a pediatrics ward, is sadly less compelling than the endless coverage we'll get of sad parents and many designer cartoon coffins. There is an infotainment element to war coverage and school shootings. The debate and posturing around gun laws and reform are more sacrosanct than the Second Amendment itself. We blame guns, mental health, drugs, bullying, masculinity in crisis, and then guns again, individual politicians. But since I can remember with even Columbine, I feel like maybe we're having the wrong conversation. There's a quote from a book I'm reading. We're going to have this author on as a guest soon for a book called Beyond Columbine. What if, however, the problem is that all these shooters feel stuck in a present? That is, a time when things are not allowed to change according to the passage of time or to provide a new milieu. As repugnant as it may seem to avow such an insight, wouldn't admitting give a starting point for truly understanding it? It is a central prohibition of capitalism never to think of the present as second best. It is our imprisonment in a non-utopian present without historicity or futurity. What capitalism teaches us is that the present moment is the best of all possible worlds. That stasis is utopia. Think about that for a minute. And on that cheery note, what do you have for us today, Cooper?
Well, good news from the other dystopian alternative. After 2 months, the lockdown in Shanghai has been lifted. The lengths to which Chinese authorities were willing to go to enforce lockdowns, not just in Shanghai, but wherever there were isolated outbreaks of COVID, have been extreme, even by the standards of sort of pre-COVID People's Republic of China. And one of the interesting features of those medical lockdowns was the way in which political authority could push down into businesses, into people's residences. For instance, the managers of apartment buildings were responsible for ensuring that their residents, their tenants, were observing the lockdown to the point where, in some cases, the owners of housing units would lock tenants inside from the outside. You get locked into your apartment to ensure compliance. And this is clearly an extreme measure which would be legally problematic in the United States, to say the least, and would be socially unpalatable in most Western countries. However, after 2 months of this, Shanghai is, in theory, COVID-free. And after this extremely intrusive period, Chinese are able to interact publicly without masks or other measures, and also not risk infection from COVID. What may result from this is a world order in which the stereotype that Americans apply to countries like Mexico or India as being kind of tropical reservoirs of exotic diseases that the government and the society are too weak, too inept, too incompetent to be able to deal with. I remember when Mexican immigrants were accused of spreading leprosy into the United States. That will actually be the position of the United States with respect to Asian countries, especially, which are able to effectively constrain the spread of COVID, and you will have a reinforcing of the economic decoupling with the public health incompatibility of open societies like the United States, where but I don't mean open socially or free societies. I mean ones without control measures that have accepted that COVID is inevitable and will adjust to just the management of a new endemic respiratory virus versus a very strict type of control in the People's Republic of China. Those two regimes are incompatible. That will prevent people from being able to move between them even more effectively than the purely political controls of the Cold War period.
Well, the thing is, I find fascinating about this is that the question I would want to ask is that is China moving into a position where they really care about wanting to have its people move into the West when it's developing such altruistic relationships with countries like in the African continent and its relationships with India in the face of this multipolarity with China and Russia coming about? It seems like there's all kinds of new and unforeseen partnerships with political actors that are on the horizon that are coming about as a consequence of this major geopolitical fracas in the Black Sea region between Russia and Ukraine. And I don't disagree with you that there's going to be an attempt to use these various illnesses and diseases to kind of limit mobility of citizens. But I'm also saying that one thing we know it's not going to do is stop the mobility of capital and the necessity of capital moving throughout the world. And is that going to exacerbate the speed upon which this proposed multipolar order comes to pass?
Well, I think that there's alternatives beyond bipolarity, beyond this kind of American-centric, Western Bloc, Sino-centric, Eastern Bloc division, where you might have, and historically, a number of East Asian countries, Japan, prior to the in the Tokugawa era, or China in the Qing dynasty and the Ming dynasty, deliberately cut themselves off from everybody else. A few limited ports of entry for international trade, or some specific privileged groups could move back and forth. But the political leadership considered it form of mismanagement to allow too much traffic with the outside world, whether it was the West, whether it was South Asia, whether it was the Muslim world. And I think that rather than moving from high level of exchange with Western countries, and especially with educational institutions in the West, to a similar exchange with the global South or with Russia, China may just shut itself off entirely or limit any exposure to foreign countries. The PRC has a legacy position of third worldism, but that's not the dominant worldview in China. There's a very strong, call it Han chauvinist, call it isolationist, a very strong orientation towards just limiting contact with foreigners entirely, just getting away from the rest of the world, which is nothing but a source of problems, whether it's America, whether it's Russia, whether it's India. Sometimes there are periods where a society just doesn't like anybody else. And that isolationism, especially in a period where there's a lot of sources of instability coming from the outside, a lot of global crises and tensions, that makes it attractive to just ride it out in relative isolation. Because what good is the outside world when all it does is throw crisis after crisis at you?
It seems like to me, Kuba, that you're projecting Russian aspirations of autocracy onto the Chinese.
Well, do you mean economic autarky, or do you mean
autarky? Yeah.
I think that, and I think that your observation that capital requires mobility, but that doesn't mean that there needs to be human mobility, and that is the favored position of a lot of regimes, and not just China or Russia, but even at the highest points of globalization in the 90s, in the 90s and early 2000s, when Americans were essentially triumphalist about international economic integration and their position at the peak of it, the enthusiasm, the untrammeled, total enthusiasm for capital and trade liberalization was never matched by any inclination towards open labor markets. There was a certain appeal among a lot of Western business leaders, a lot of the Western bourgeoisie, if you will, for cheap foreign labor. But ideally, it would be accessed in a host country rather than brought into your domestic economy. And what I might see as a potential outcome is that you'll maintain a high level of trade integration, maybe with different patterns. That's where you'll see the China, Global South, China, Russia bloc, capital and trade. But when it comes to human mobility, there could just be a secular decrease entirely. That as public health concerns, together with what might be called political hygiene concerns, intellectual hygiene concerns, about exposure to foreign disinformation or ideological contamination, both pull in the direction of let's just cut off these flows from the West. And speaking to some Chinese abroad, whether naturalized Chinese Canadians, Chinese Americans, or Chinese that are living here, there is a feeling that officially the type of policies, the type of burdens that are placed on people who want to come back to China are great enough and persistent enough that it's possible to begin to wonder whether they even want you to go back. And during the Tokugawa period, for instance, in Japan, which only ended in the 19th century, it was a capital crime for a foreigner to enter Japan, for a Westerner to enter Japan, except for a very limited contingent of Dutch in Nagasaki. But Japanese who had somehow gotten abroad, even if it was through no fault of their own, shipwrecked fishermen or sailors, if they returned, they would be subject to execution as well. And this is attested to in some naval journals from the 18th century, where Japanese that had been rescued by Western ships, they begged not to be returned to Japan because they knew they would be executed. They were very glum about it. Like sometimes they resisted rescue because they hoped that they might be able to wash up on Japan rather than go through a foreign vessel, which would be a death sentence.
Always keeping it cheery here on our Thursday night news roundup. What can I tell you? Thank you so much for that informative recap of things to look forward to, Kuba. I appreciate that.
Well, you can imagine that, and the chat is calling me out, saying that, somebody read Shogun by an American author, and now they think they know about Japan. But the closed state period, sakoku in Japanese, that was a ideological expression of a certain, Japanese Confucian thought about the danger, the sort of risk of contamination and the low value of the rest of the world. And honestly, when you consider refugee flows, especially climate refugees or movement of people from Latin America into the United States, I wouldn't be surprised if, perhaps not in as obvious a form, but you end up with closed borders, a similarly draconian policy, where effectively crossing without prior authorization, if you're not part of certain privileged groups, the border can become lethal, as it already is for many undocumented migrants that try to cross through the desert to avoid capture and imprisonment.
Well, moving on in these final minutes of the show, Pascal, you wanted to talk about something today.
As our audience may or may not know, because of the current crisis that we have in the Russia-Ukraine situation, there is an impending problem we have with wheat and food production going on in the world. Because if you are not aware, Ukraine, up until recently, produces something in over 30% of global wheat stock for the world, while Russia also produces a large amount as well. In the face of the current military conflagration between those two countries, it has been expected that there would be a need for other large scale wheat producing countries to start to export their surplus to countries like the United States, like countries in the global south, that would be needing to shore up the shortages that they would be facing in the face of what's going on in Russia and Ukraine. Obviously, one of the contributing factors to the current inflationary crisis that we see ourselves in as well has to do with the fact that the impending shortages of wheat as well are affecting food prices and the like. Well, one of the reports that I recently fell upon is demonstrating how climate change and environmental factors are making it difficult for particularly two countries, India and France, to shore up their wheat supplies because in India, they've been facing exorbitantly high temperatures as of late, in something in the area of 40 degrees Celsius. I'm not sure what that turns into in terms of Fahrenheit.
110, 120.
That's because Cuba is being that he's in Canada is more familiar with the changing the metric system to our Fahrenheit numbers. 110, 120 degrees
Your
Fahrenheit.
American degrees.
American degrees exactly is pretty high, and France has been dealing with massive amounts of rain shortages as well. And one thing that what people don't know is that France is one of the biggest exporters of wheat in the EU. So as a consequence of these climatic problems, though they have not put a complete kibosh on the capacity of these secondary markets to export wheat, it has caused an even greater potentiality of shortages of wheat and foodstuffs to become an impending situation for not only the modern and Western world, but particularly the global South and in Africa, to be an unintended consequence of what we're talking about here when we're dealing with this Russia Ukraine situation. So the question then becomes, how exactly are we going to be dealing with an inflationary crisis that is dealing with energy prices as well as foodstuff prices being on a higher tier, combined with an impending food shortage crisis that we may be stepping into, not only because of the Russia Ukraine shoring up of wheat, but because of climate catastrophes that are already cannibalizing the existing wheat uh, storage locales that we have throughout the world. So that's something that I'd like to bring the attention to the audience. I'd like to hear Kubo or Jason have any thoughts on it.
It's I was looking at reports of different types of agricultural production in Ukraine and the difference between pre-war and current output, and it's dramatic. It's not just wheat either. Things like sunflower, things like barley, all kinds of staple crops, which Westerners take for granted that they can purchase at extraordinarily low prices. Ukraine is a key producer, not enough to necessarily trigger shortages, but enough to trigger major price disturbances. And that's what we're seeing. The inflationary pressure is not just on energy, but on food as well, food prices. Western countries are somewhat insulated from the worst effects because the United States, for instance, has almost century-long system of agricultural subsidies in place, which have led to massive overproduction. But even so, the labor, the constant wage cutting, and the precariousness of many workers at the sort of rank and file level mean that even a slight perturbation in food prices can lead to some very dramatic consequences. And as was shown, for instance, in Florida at the beginning of COVID, the social and economic supports that are supposed to kick in, unemployment insurance, specifically in this case, even when they haven't been officially cut back, the capacity to deliver those benefits, all of the requirements, the means testing and the documentation demands, and the processing of all of those requirements, that capacity has been deliberately pared down so that it will break if it's used at scale. And this is a point where the class warfare element of neoliberalism moves from exploitation to something much more sinister and dangerous.
No doubt. No doubt.
Well, it's
On that happy note,
it's just been a cheery show all around. We will be
did
doing.
Did you miss me?
Well, we're going to be doing the call-in second half of the show. So if you guys have comments, there's so many comments in the chat about this. I'm sure people have something they want to say. You have the opportunity to get it off your chest in the second half in the champagne room. And you guys can give me updates on the Warriors game. Let me know if the Warriors are winning. I don't know. Basketball is a little harder to watch out here than football. So I don't even know if I can watch the game. Also, this month, in just a few weeks, Pascal and I are going to be getting on a plane for the first time for both of us in years. Cuba, not so much. He's flying around all the time.
Well, it's experimental aircraft. I don't know if you can call it flying. It's more of a kind of anti-gravity gliding.
Bam! People wanted to know, hey, what do you guys do? Can you guys see that? I have a very small screen in front of me, so I don't know how big this is for people. This is as big as it's right now. You're too small. I told you that's a list of things you can't say to somebody, Pascal.
No, I said the screen is pretty small.
Oh. So June 26th, Pascal, Cuba, myself, Ben Burgess, Doug Lane. Who else is going to be there?
Gene.
Nope.
Oh.
No Gene Bajlan.
Oh.
Gene Bajlan is stuck. We have to free Gene. That should be another hashtag. We get free Gene Bajlan. He's stuck in the UK for a while. But we are going to be at Project Parlor in Brooklyn for Margaret Kimberly. Totally forgot. Margaret Kimberly's going to be there. The most canceled man in America, Norm Finkelstein, is going to be there. Strom says he's going to be there. Now, from my understanding, the show is free. Pascal, don't sound so excited. Please keep it down.
I'm not sounding anything. I'm not talking.
I know. I said don't sound so excited. I'm being sarcastic.
Oh, okay.
You and Cuba are being way too quiet. Are you guys excited about the whole thing?
I'm excited about the font size of Ben Burgess's name, and I saw that, and I'm like, this is scandalous, right? Like, and then I realized, oh no, he has got this is the silent privilege of the short name, like the low character first and last name combination. There's a reason he doesn't go by Benjamin, right? Well, look at like Margaret and Norman, right? They're just cannibalizing all their space, and they get small font size as their reward. If it was Norm Fink, he'd be even bigger than Ben Burgess.
I think it has more to do with in show business, the bigger your name, the bigger you are a draw. So I don't know if that was what considering who's putting this together, I seriously think it's more what you were saying, Cuba, like his name's just smaller.
Exactly.
But generally, that's what
comrades don't think about who the bigger draw is. They're just giving everyone the exact same number of horizontal inches, even if that means that the vertical inches.
Well, this conversation is going in ways that I don't know what the hell's happening.
What's the drip? Someone says, what's the drip for the TIR crew? Y'all gonna color coordinate. Born Center Cold World, I want to know if you are someone that recently friended me on Facebook. Some of your comments make me laugh. It's the Coachella treatment, Lenny Powers. Correct. That is what we call it. You can tell how much someone's getting paid by how big the font is of your name on Coachella. Or at least some people know how much people are getting paid.
Well, all right.
But I'm excited. Pascal, you're not excited?
I'm thrilled.
You're one of the people that are on the panel. They were having
the panel that I don't know what the subject is.
That's not true. You've been briefed.
I don't know. I'll find out though.
Doug Lane hits me up last week. He goes, Jason, do you want to co-host? I was like, no, sure. I don't know how to co-host something like this. Am I going to be Flavor Flav to Doug Lane's Chuck D, or is it going to be vice versa? Is Doug Lane going to be Flavor Flav to my Chuck D? There's only one way to find out.
Honestly, if it's the two of you, it'll be two Ed McMahons with no Johnny Carson.
But I'm dumb.
That is like the meanest shit, Cuba. God damn. You couldn't even make an Arsenio joke?
And I honestly, that was such a sick burn that I don't even know how to follow it up. I'm like, shit. Like, what does Johnny Carson even sound like? Can I do an impression? Will anybody even be able to tell?
Someone said, who's the Beyonce of the TIR crew? The Beyonce of the TIR crew will be there as well in Tucson.
It's Tucson. That's excellent.
Is the wow.
It's the Beyonce of the TIR crew.
Oh yeah, I'm excited for her solo career after this.
I don't think you're ready for that, Jelly.
I don't think anyone is. I've seen the readiness reports coming out of the Pentagon, coming out of the NSA. There is nothing that we can do to prepare for that, Jelly.
Tucson is going to cuss us out. We go to the room, we're going to have an off-air cuss out by Tucson.
Yeah, we're going to start the champagne room, and you can just tell that we were all chewed out. It's like, oh.
With that thick-ass New York accent. I'm here for it. Tucson, just know that whatever outfit that you wear for the show, it has to be Beyonce approved. Whatever the fuck that means.
No, I'll tell you what the Beyonce move is. She's going to show up wearing what I wear for every single podcast, but she's going to just wear it better. Like 100%. And it's like, it was my outfit, it was my uniform, but now I have to retire it. Thank you.
If that happens, I'm excited. Are you going to wear the fit? Are you going to wear the usual Cuba fit? Or are you going to come in a whole Russian tracksuit?
Well, there might be multiple costume changes over the course of the night. But
please, if you're real, please make that happen. Where Cuba has multiple outfit changes.
But it'll be like slightly different shade of white, slightly different. It's actually going to be the exact same tie, but with a double Windsor.
Pascal, what you got your outfit planned?
I want to do some shopping, get some suits.
Suits. We know what you're wearing, man. You're going back to New York. You're going to have Tim's, Lee jeans.
Tim's, Lee jeans, and Gazelle glasses.
I know exactly what you're going to have. You're going to have some Gazelles on, Wallabies. We know already. You're coming totally New Yorked out. Look, I've seen Beat Street. I know how you people dress.
On that note, to the champagne room.
And I'll be dressed like Shabba-Doo in Breaking to Electric Boogaloo. So be ready. Be ready, people. We are out.